So if we could start with your full name, please.
My full is Colonel Bob Thacker, United States Air Force. I was in the Army Air Corps to start with before World War II. And of course, after World War II, we got our own military department because after what the Japanese did to us at Pearl Harbor, well, I will tell you a little bit of story in reverse.
Can I just grab a few I'm going to ask you a few quick questions just to get an overview.
Go ahead.
Where and when were you born?
I was born. Now, we started out with a very friendly attitude with this interview. And why did you have to bring up El Centro, California? Now, I'm going to put up with one more of those dumb questions. And I soon found out that there was something better than El Centro. And along about 1936, 37, I decided that either the Army or the Navy, and my lack of money and brains all happened at one time, and I requested that I be put on the list for pilot training both to the Army and to the Navy. Well, the Army selected me first, so I ended up I enlisted for the Army Air Corps pilot training in the summer of 1937. I started my military operational life.
Okay, so what is your birth date?
February 21st, 1918, and I am 100 years old about a couple of months ago. Wonderful. So we're talking here just, well, the people that are in the know said there's 2 out of every 10,000 that are 100 years old in the States today. And obviously I'm having a hell of a good time.
And you were a lieutenant colonel.
I was a full colonel. I served 31 years with the Air Force. And I was promoted up through the ranks rather rapidly because just confidentially between you and a million other people, the Air Force before World War II was a gentleman's flying club, period. And a gentleman's flying club is just what I expounded it to be. We didn't have any crews. We just flew airplanes. We had no idea what was going to happen at Pearl Harbor, the flights to the moon. And that'll be part of my little interview with you today, is being one of the few aircraft flying that was friendly that Sunday morning at Pearl Harbor.
One other question I have is, did you receive any medals for your service?
Well, as wars continued on in our country, I was given 2 medals that I'm rather proud of. As old men go, I was awarded with 2 Silver Stars, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 10 Air Medals, and many, many, many campaign decorations. But I was awarded my Silver Stars, there was only one medal between that and the Congressional Medal of Honor. But as wars went on, they made new medals. So instead of me being one separated from the Distinguished Congressional Medal, now there's 4. So I'm not as high on the medal business as I was when I was on active duty.
Still pretty high in my book. So, you joined the military, 1937, as you stated.
Yes.
Years before the U.S. ever joined World War II.
I joined the Gentlemen's Flying Club.
So, can you just briefly explain sort of what you were doing in those years? And
Well, in those days, you had to wait, and you were giving a number. 2 years of college, which made me a number on a reverse scale. I had to wait 2 years because my number was not high enough. If you were an Annapolis or a West Point graduate, you went to number 5. Well, I never got to be number 5, but I was called anyway. But I waited 2 years. I worked for the post office, and best move I ever made in my life, except marrying my beautiful sweetheart. That's number 1. 71 years, not bad. Very lovely lady. But life goes on.
so after the 2-year waiting period,
I went to primary flying school in Santa Maria, California. We're flying what we call a bi-wing, 2 wings, and made by Fairchild Aircraft Company. And we had no instruments in my seat. In those days, you listened to your flying wires to see what your airspeed was. Your flying wires, how do they sound, Lieutenant? Well, how do they sound, Cadet? You hear that sound? That's on your final approach. Yes, sir. Well, that's the sound I want to hear when you get your first solo ride. You've had 8 rides, and that's pretty good. So I'm going to get out, and that's the noise I want to hear. Rather primitive, don't you think?
a bit.
Well, that's a long time ago. And then we went to Basic, in Randolph Field, Texas. It was called Basic, but it was a low-wing, all-metal airplane made by North American, AT-6. And it took about a year. That's why the airlines just love them, because the military pilot does what you tell him to do. And he gets used to that, and the airlines love that. Not only does he get some experience, but he gets some experience with the retract gear system, flaps, and all that stuff. So he gets a pretty well, you can raise this flying time requirement for commercial airlines, but just because you raise it doesn't, there's no way to get it except from the military. So we are 2,000 pilots short right now in the Air Force. We are 2,000. We can't keep them in. with all that flying time that the pilot gets as a trainee, he still doesn't have the 1,200 hours that he requires by the country's legislators. Unless you get in the airplane and have somebody certify that that flying time is correct, you're not flying. And that's why they like to see that military training. It's called a Form 5. That's your flying time. 1,200 hours. I have a P-51 friend. P-51 was I will just say that the P-51 with the Rolls engine in it, after they changed engines from the Allison to the Rolls engine, then it made the best fighter pilot, the best pilot for interception against the Germans and the Japanese. But for the first year in the Pacific, if you will study a little harder than you probably ever wanted to study anything, the Japanese just, wherever they wanted to go, they went. Where are you going to find an oxygen mask for a low pressure B-17 bomber pilot that needs one in Port Moresby, New Guinea? You think you're going to find something that looks like an oxygen mask for a B-17 in Port Moresby, New Guinea? And if you don't have a pilot for that B-17, it's not very good airplane, right?
Right.
So you have to get everything that's supported by that B-17. And not only that, you have to get it to Port Moresby, New Guinea. And if you turn around the other end of the horn, that's a pretty big deal if you're in Port Moresby, New Guinea, without an oxygen mask. So we were defenseless. The Japs, I'm briefed down by the superiors that I'm not to say Japs. I'm supposed to say Japanese. But I will say the Japs did about what they wanted to do because there was no defense. The attack at Pearl Harbor, there are certain military rules that should be used, and the Japanese used every one of them, the Japanese did. Mass, you know what mass is, don't you? Mass is mass.
Size.
Big size. Surprise, 8 o'clock Sunday morning. How much of a surprise do you think there was on that military base in Pearl Harbor? 8 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning. Why didn't they just why didn't they destroy all the petroleum? They didn't want to destroy all the petroleum. That's why they didn't do it. They had a certain mass that they were going to use. There were 11 B-17s approaching Pearl Harbor that morning. They had just left the States at 10 o'clock Saturday night. And who do you think was having dinner with me and my wife, who had just driven in from Salt Lake? the #1 airman, General Arnold, was there. And somebody on his staff who didn't know his ass from birth, didn't know his ass from third base, he said, "Goodbye and good shooting, you might get some."
How did you interpret that?
I'm 22 years old, and if you don't think I was a hot pilot, you are mistaken. I was blazing hot, right? How much brains did you have at 22 years of age? You didn't have any brains at all.
Thought I had a lot.
Well, that's what I kind of thought. Because, my navigator, I'd had one ride with him at night. My boss called me in and said, "Thacker, I want you to go up to Seattle and pick up a B-17 and fly it back here where you're stationed." I'm in Salt Lake City. I said, "Boss, I can't go to Seattle and pick up a B-17. I've never even sat in the left seat of a B-17, no less fly it." He said, "Thacker, can't you understand English? I told you to get your navigator, and here he is." And I said, "What are you doing in a cadet uniform?" And he said, "They grabbed me right out of Pan Am Flying Navigational School, and I'm your navigator." "All right, let's go to Seattle." That was my briefing to my navigator.
And how many days before was this?
4.
You took off? Or
4. Go to Seattle and pick up a brand new B-17, which is a little bit different than the old B-17. Not much, but a little different. But, man, about an hour out, I said, "Well, I've been told that the commercial broadcasting station is going to be on all night for us 11 B-17s coming in from the States." So I started calling the tower, told them who I was, and I wanted instructions to land.
this is how you're flying into Hickam.
This is how I'm flying it, and I'm on top of the clouds. We were IFR, in-flight instrument approach. And just about that time, pow, there's a big hole in the clouds. And I thought, well, that's Diamond Head. He was a mile off out of 2,500 miles, shooting 3-star fixes all night long. He was a mile off course. So I'm letting down through the hole in the clouds. I said, "There's George Duke's home." I'd never been there before. Then I said, "There's the Royal Hawaiian Hotel," blah, 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 blah. Nothing.
I understand you're doing this
nobody.
all on no sleep as well.
I was flying along the waterfront. I said, there's the Royal Hawaiian Hotel." Jesus Christ. Come up here and get me a new frequency. Nobody's responding to me whatsoever. So, my radio operator, he's in the back of the airplane someplace. I knew right where it was, but... And I said, "Christ, I said, what's that big column of black smoke?" I said, "Oh, no, my radio operator had been there before." He said, "They're burning off the cane fields." I said, we're out of fuel, we haven't had any sleep for 2 nights. I'm just going to land this airplane. I don't know, I mean, just about that time, bang, 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 bang. What the hell's going on? Then the tower came on. He said, Air Force 432, you're number 2 to land. Land north to south. We're under attack by Japanese airplanes. What? They were just as surprised as I was, or what we would be, if a nuke weapon hit this house right now. What do you do? Where do you go? I don't know. And number one, what takes over? What takes over is survival. Well, Hickam and the commercial airport were right together in those days. And then in between the two airports, there was this scrub growth. Eventually they paved over the whole thing, and you could taxi from one airfield to the other. But I took my crew and we went into the scrub growth. And that's the smartest decision I ever made in my life. Because in about 15 minutes, here come about 13 horizontal, straight and level Japanese bombers. And they wiped out that airfield. They couldn't have done, they didn't miss. They wiped out those barracks, and they just, and there was no describing. Nobody knew anything. We had no slit trenches, no barrage balloons. There was nothing. There was nowhere to go to fight a war. The Japanese and Hickam are right together. In fact, the mess at Hickam is right at the mouth of Pearl Harbor. They sank every boat in the harbor. They sank the floating dry dock in the harbor. And they sank the boat in the floating dry dock. That's mass destruction. And it was kind of a, you see those torpedo bombers drop down below the trees, and you see those Betties climb up, and just right behind them was this tremendous column of torpedo explosions into those big 14 inches, 14-inch shells. They never fired a shot.
Now, the smoke that you saw as you were coming in, that was not the cane fields.
That was not the cane fields. That was the Arizona going up. That's what that was. So that shows you how they can burn the cane fields down.
Now, as you were coming in to land,
yes,
were you being shot? Was your plane being shot at as well?
At that point, no. But the tower came on, gave me good instructions. They said, you're number 2 to land north to south, and so forth and so on. So I said, Jesus Christ, what's going on? He said, we're under attack by Japanese aircraft. You are number 2 to land. Well, Jesus, when the Navy's shooting my ass out, I'm vacating those instructions. I'm going to get this thing on the ground as soon as I can. So I broke out of traffic to the right. I already had the little flap down, had the gear down, and I came in, landed crosswind, 3 zeros, shot me up pretty bad on the final approach. And they shot my right gear out. So I landed the airplane successfully and ground looped on the end of the runway. And it's a good thing that landing gear was sitting on the ground, the right gear, because I would have taxied out right and parked in front of visiting aircraft. And it was just long enough for me to get killed and all the rest of my crew. It was horizontal bombers.
Now you said 11 bombers.
There were 11 bombers took off that night. And I don't say this in any derogatory manner, but let me tell you something. Any offensive horizontal bomber that can't find something wrong with that airplane, if he wants to, particularly when he's halfway between San Francisco and Hawaii. So 2 of our famous airmen turned around and went back. In other words, when you get right down to it, you just get shit up your neck, and you turn around and go back. So 2 of them turned around and went back, and 11 of us completed the mission. And but you can't describe when you knew what was going on, because you had a perfect commander's operation, because you were watching it go on, and you're in the wrong business. You're wearing the wrong suit.
Now, did you on
that was me. I was in the wrong suit. I should have been in a Japanese suit.
Was your plane equipped with any weapons, any guns at that time?
No, we went out as light as possible, because actually our mission was the Philippines, but we didn't fly under those orders. We just flew under secret orders, and you got orders to go to Hickam. Then as soon as they got fuel and the runways finished on some of our atolls, then I guess so we didn't get ready with aircraft and runways on some of those atolls until February. And so we didn't get into Brisbane, Australia until right around my birthday, February 21st, 1918. But it turned out to be December 7th.
Now, all the men in your crew
were
unarmed.
No, we didn't have any arms.
Do you know the fate of the remaining 10 planes that were due to land that day?
I have someplace in my records there is and I'm not going to hunt for them, not in your time and not in my time either. But there is we were in fact, we were grounded most of the time because we needed spare parts. We needed spare engines, we needed spare turbos, We needed this, we needed that. You know, military rides on his stomach or an oxygen mask or whatever you want to call it, but to support a war halfway around the world from where you're supposed to be fighting it for is quite an achievement, I think. It took us, MacArthur was over there. And it took us a whole day. I don't think that we had an offensive B-17. There was a B-17 unit at Clark Air Force Base, but they waited. They didn't wait an hour, they didn't wait 2 hours, they didn't wait any time at all because they had no system to where you get bombing targets when you just lost all of your B-17s. 3 hours before we got an airplane that was flyable at Clark Field. And by that time, there were no airplanes left. But it was so well planned. And there was a 4-hour difference between Hickam and Clark. So nobody knew what the hell was going on. What do you mean, attack Pearl Harbor? They wiped out the strongest military unit in all of the Pacific. Betty Jo wrote me a letter, and she says, "Honey, the people want to know where the hell the Navy is." And I wrote back, I didn't know this, but I wrote back, and, well, honey, to answer the people's question is that the American Navy is at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. Of course, that was never sent. That was cut out. But that's exactly what they did. They were the battleships were sitting in the bottom of Pearl Harbor.
Now, after you guys had landed and took cover or found shelter,
that's
safety.
right, found shelter.
How long did you stay there for?
We stayed there. Well, if you're sharp as you look, I've already told you that. We didn't get into Australia until right around my birthday, which is in February.
But I mean, for that day, because there was a second wave that came through.
There was a second. Well, yes, it was about. Which some of these answers are just undeniably complicated because there are no written histories. There's nothing written down. We're just sitting ducks. We were as defenseless as we are sitting right here. Just as defenseless.
So what did you do in the hours and days following the attack?
That's a good question. We had 11 airplanes, brand new B-17s, and the Navy, they had some PBYs that were not knocked out at Ford Island. Ford Island has got a little short runway, just like the Navy has at several shoreborne places. So we started we immediately fell into, because it was an air war. That's what it was. It wasn't a Navy war. It was an air war. And they had actually two main strikes. The main strikes, of course, was to eliminate the enemy's offensive air. That was bomb the airfields, bomb the hangars, and then the fighters came in and strafed, and they just had the Japanese pilots were briefed for certain, because the embassy there, of course, well, all embassies are nothing but spies anyway. So all of the Japanese pilots were briefed on certain set targets, and that's where they went, and that's what they did. And oil refineries or oil storages were not on the list. So we destroyed their opportunity. Or they destroyed the opportunity. And there were a few U.S. pilots in their P-40s, which would only go as half as high as the Japanese Zero fighters. And so if you're taking on somebody that'll go twice as high as your airplane will go, and twice the speed that your airplane will go, even if you're flying a fighter airplane, who do you think is going to win?
The other guy.
The other guy. You're right. You're right for a change this time, Isaac. Yeah. So that's my story. So in about, I would say, last of November, we started hearing these rumors that my unit, they're going home after a year's combat. And I had flown 48 sorties.
This is November 42.
Oh, no. Yes. Well, I knew that my unit was rotating to the States.
And which unit was that?
Well, it depends upon whose orders you're following from day to day. That's the truth. There were the 19th Bomb Group with B-17s at Clark Air Force Base, which of course in about 3 hours were going to be destroyed by the Japanese. And by the time they got organized, they never got off the ground because there wasn't anything to fly. So we started flying 800 miles to sea on a Y search. You had a certain line to fly for 800 miles. Then you went to a Y search. So this was a track and this was a track. You made a 360-degree turn or whatever it is required, and turn around and fly the exact route back. When we were doing this as a crew. Now, as a crew, we did this about every 3 days. Now, what the other crews did, I don't know, because I was just a man that's qualified to be 17. And I was just a number, and to assign from this pegboard to this pegboard over here. And that's all I was. Of course, I was in a recce outfit, and we were supposed to report it. And show you. I knew where there were two PBYs. You know what a PBY is? Okay, a PBY is a twin-engine, high-wing patrol bomber. And I knew right where they were. They were somewhere between this mark and that mark on a map. And I was right there. And there were two PBYs down at sea. And I couldn't find one. I could find the other. But that's a big ocean out there. And I could not find that PBY. It's a great big twin-engine flying boat. And I never did find that airplane. But as I understand it through grapevine and war stories, that, well, we did drop them water from our canisters tied around the Mae West, and we saw one of the PBYs start up their engine, because we don't have anything that just pinpoints a PBY with a couple of water canteens. The trajectory is not exactly true all the time, if you get what I mean. We just have to guess. So this PBY, I guess, saw the canteens and PBYs tied together, and they cranked up and they found the water, and they found the other PBYs, and as I understand, they survived. But the reason for my story is I knew where both of those airplanes were, but I could not find them. And this was 8 other people aboard this P-17, and we never did find them. I gave up after a while. We'd given myself plenty of fuel to get back to Hickam. But that little war story is how difficult things are. And I hated to leave them, but I didn't want to put our own crew at risk either.
Now I understand you had an incident with was it the USS Chicago?
Well, that's another little story.
Can we talk about that?
Oh, you're driving me pretty dry, aren't you?
Well, you just tell me when you're done.
You're rather persistent after this hour. What time is it?
I got a broken watch, so I don't rightfully know.
Well, my outfit finally ended up working out of Port Moresby, New Guinea. Port Moresby, New Guinea is a little shack place in Port Moresby, New Guinea. And actually our home base, where our maintenance was done, what is it maintenance is done? The crew. There was nobody at Port Moresby, New Guinea. So, on one of my routine recce missions, I'm traveling along about a little higher than 22,000. And I saw this activity. In about 5 minutes, I picked up some offensive anti-aircraft fire coming from what I thought, and it was very offensive to me. And so I said, well, whoever is shooting at me certainly doesn't know that I'm a B-17 and I have a Yank on board. At least one Yank is a pilot. And I said, if that son of a bitch is shooting at me, I'm going to bomb at him. So I said, we're going to take a run on that bastard. So we finally got, and that was only one return we were getting. So I said, we're going to make a run on that bastard. So we did. I made sure all the buttons were in the right place. And I said, I want you to give us 30 seconds bomb interval. I was carrying one bomb bay with full of fuel. The other bomb bay on the other side was carrying 4 1,000-pound bombs. Any one of those bombs would have blown that Chicago size boat, would blow that weapon system right. It broke him right in two. So that's what we reported. I saw a little bit of staff cars. What the hell is a staff car following me to where I parked this morning while I left? And who jumped out of the airplane was a brigadier general and a full colonel. And the general said, Lieutenant, you just missed the USS Chicago. Yes, you too short and too over. Was I lucky not to have bombed the Chicago? Because in those days, nobody knew anything. The Navy wouldn't give you the time of day. And many's the day that I was the only offensive unit flying that day in the whole of the Pacific. My one little airplane and I had 5 targets that day that I was supposed to photograph and report back how many boats are in the harbor, what do the airfields look like, how many airplanes you think are there, what types they are, and all that crap. But it's damn hard to find oxygen masks for B-17 in Port Moresby, New Guinea. That's what I'm trying to explain to you, why things were so slow in the Pacific. And
the Japanese had a pretty good stronghold over there initially.
For a whole year. Where are you gonna find an oxygen mask for a B-17? In Port Moresby, New Guinea. There isn't any such thing.
Did you guys have to fabricate or manufacture?
Well, you didn't fly.
At all?
That's why the Japanese, the Japs had their own way.
You just had to wait it out.
You don't mind if I call them Japs, do you?
I don't mind.
Well, I came from El Centro, which is early produce, California, and a quarter of the high school were Japanese, so I knew the Japanese pretty well. They were the best students, the best athletes, the best farmers. Now, you're getting an interview that nobody else has got. Nobody's ever sat in that chair.
I'm honored to be here, sir.
You are, because I'm the last living guy that can say that what he said, because I did it for a year. And I started out day one.
Before day one.
Before day one. Well, that leads me to another story. You ready for another story?
Yes, sir.
We did rotate home to Pilot, Texas. And if you know what Pilot, Texas and Pecos is, it's just nothing. There's just not any oxygen mass will fit the B-17 in Pilot, Texas, which was known as the Rattlesnake Airfield. Well, I decided there was something better to do than train crews. So I snibbled my way to where the noise is the greatest. Where do you think the noise was the greatest?
Over in Europe?
That's right. Not only that, I got myself scheduled for D-Day. The 5th of June. And if you're something like I am, you already know that the colonel doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because it was June the 6th.
Due to the weather delay.
Well, you just came up another 50%. You were not supposed to know that, and I was to hit my black ace and wipe you out right on the flight line at Hickam.
I can edit that out. We can rewind a bit if you want.
No, you don't do anything. You can put on anything you want. Anything I've said, I've thought about it, or I wouldn't have said it. And the reason that I thought about it is because I was scheduled for the 5th, and that was D-Day, and it was stinking. The weather was lousy, and it's a good thing Eisenhower postponed it. And the front did pass, and I flew on the 5th, and you could have walked on the deck of a boat all the way across that channel. There were that many boats. Boats, ships, I don't know what the hell. But I would just say I've never seen so many boats in such a congested area in my life. But of course I can, now that I thought about it, so you can build a story that yes, I was all set to go on D-Day. And then it was Colonel. D-Day was not the 5th, it was the 6th, if you remember, sir. Well, if I'd have told it straight up, that would have been no story at all, because I didn't fly on the 6th. I flew on the 5th, which threw my war stories all out of kilter. But when I say I was programmed, because I was at the end of my tour, and but now that I've prepared it and explained to the audience that I was not quite as smart as my interviewer, and he immediately picked it up that I had my dates. He gave me that chicken you-know-what smile, and he said, "Colonel, it was the 6th, not the 5th. I said, "You bastard. You ruined my whole story," because he was aware that it wasn't the 5th, it was the 6th, because Eisenhower changed it because of the stinking weather. And the shores were so, it was impossible to land any kind of a deal on the 5th. The 6th was acceptable, and it turned out to be acceptable. But I didn't get to fly on D-Day.
You would never fly 2 days in a row? It just happened
No.
to...
Well, you see, we had actually, I had complete control of once we're airborne. I could abort the mission because I was leading it.
And how many bombers are you leading?
It all depends upon how much effort we're going to put up on this target. I led as high as 56 airplanes, and I've also read as high as 2,000 and 2,300 bombers on Punimundi, which was their secret, von Braun's secret intercontinental ballistic missiles. And my bombardier did a superb job. He just wiped out that whole outfit. Just wiped them out. And don't you think that's not some responsibility? But I was without question the most experienced B-17 leader in both theaters. In fact, you've never spoken to a full colonel B-17 lead commander of the entire 8th Air Force. And I'm 24 years old. It wasn't Doolittle in that airplane, it was me.
It's a heck of a lot of responsibility.
Oh, tremendous. And of course, the lead airplanes we had special. Every airplane that was on that raid had an egg and a shell. You actually got a shell for breakfast. Otherwise, you had pancakes, but you didn't have any eggs in a shell. But if you were on that mission, there were certain tables that you better not show up with an egg unless you were on that mission.
Now, can I ask you about the medals that you received? You said 2
Yes.
Silver Stars.
Yes.
Can you tell me, was it for any particular instance that you received those for and what they were?
Yes. In the early days, Amelia Earhart used that as a refueling station, Lae, New Guinea. And that was before her fatal takeoff. And now we're moved into about 3 months or 4 months into the war now. And I made my run a bombing run this time. And my bombardier said, "I think we're in for a rough ride, Lieutenant." "Yes, I can see 5 zeros lined up for takeoff, and they're taking off right now." And this smart bastard says, "And who do you think they're looking at?" "They're looking at me." Well, I was the only one airborne that morning. And through to good luck and clear thinking, we survived with these zeros making circles around my B-17. Well, I'm pulling everything but my front teeth. And boy, when you see those two blinding headlights tracers, when you see those things come out of those forward firing wing guns, and they're aiming right at you, and you're not made, and you don't have the firepower that a B-17 has, that just 1 trillimeter, if he hit you, that would blow you in half. A half millimeter is a real cannon. And I escaped. I only got 1 man wounded. We had him. He was the ball turret, supposed to be the ball turret, but after the fighters had to leave us because of fuel, and when I could get out of my seat, and this ball turret started to lose consciousness and started to lose movement of half of his body. And that was because he had about the size of a silver dollar, and we got him to a good hospital. And after flying about 17 hours for that day, and the military, and we hit the target incidentally, and so they very graciously gave me a Silver Star, which I didn't get. I was never presented with it. But you get a certain reputation. You write the orders. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to go to lay. You're supposed to take off at such and such a time. You're supposed to be at certain bombing altitudes. And that's what you do. And you get a reputation that the guy does what he says he's going to do. And you go ahead and do it. And really, most of us came back anyway. And the bastards were not going to get me. Never. Never did you hear me, Fuji. You're not going to get me. You can sit out there and shoot at me all day long. You're not going to get me. And of course, they never did. But
and the second Silver Star you received?
That was just good luck and smart thinking. And I did the first thing that pops into my mind is survival. We had the airplane at the end of the runway, which they didn't normally have B-17s parked at the end of the runway. they're parked over in front of Base Alps. And that was the worst thing you could have possibly done, Lieutenant. So it didn't turn out that way. It was all good luck. We saved the crew, we saved the airplane, and the guy right behind me did have not. They got him on the final. And in fact, I've got a picture of the B-17 burning in the middle on the runway. And everything just worked out for me.
Where did this occur?
Right at Hickam Field.
Oh, this was on.
Yeah, this is right at Hickam Field.
December 7th.
Yeah.
This is for the landing that you had made there.
Yeah, the landing, escaping the Japanese,
Got it.
and then taking care of the crew. Oh man, here we are. No transportation, no cars, no nothing. We just left Salt Lake City to go to Seattle and pick up an airplane and bring it home. In 2 days, we landed, because Salt Lake had been socked in for weather, we landed in Tucson. We landed field checks. And my second ride with a navigator that I'd never seen before in my life. I hadn't even graduated from Pan American Navigation School. And so it was just luck and good luck. Then I got a peacetime GFC, Distinguished Flying Cross, for the flight of the Betty Joe. My boss called me in one day. That's when I was assigned to the Flight Test Division at Air Force Headquarters. That's what I was assigned to. And then my boss said, the Air Force wants a little bit more publicity with the P-82. And they think that they have a flight plan that'll take you from Tokyo to New York. No, he's not going to do it. And he said, incidentally, I had assigned a first lieutenant and a captain to the program. And I said, well, the boss said, Thacker, you do it. Okay. In those days, you were assigned programs. Like Chuck Yeager was assigned the X-1 project, Speed of Sound. And incidentally, there's 3 airmen I want you to remember. Wright brothers, geniuses. Chuck Yeager, probably the best stick and rudder man that the Air Force will ever own. Let me tell you what Chuck did. The company pilot wanted $150,000 for the first release from the V-29. Now, do you know what I'm talking about? Well, you know that the X-1 had a mothership, and you dug a hole and put the X-1 in the hole, and then you moved the B-29, which is a converted bomber, over the hole and shackled it to the Bombay tanks, and you were ready to go to 25,000. And that's what the pilot wanted, 150,000, just for that one maneuver, just to release. And the Air Force said, no, we're not paying that money. Chuck not only volunteered for the program, he did it for monthly pay, $212 a month. And Chuck did it for $212 a month, and Willems wanted $150,000 for the first free fall. So that's the kind of Chuck that we have in the Air Force. And so there was a great discussion about money flyers and real flyers. And you know who the real flyers are. They're not the money guys. They're the Chuck Yeagers. And up on the dry lakes in those days, where are you going to find a porta potty on one of the dry lakes? You guess where a porta potty is. It's back in the storage someplace there. There was nothing there. So the aircraft was being released into the squadrons, and the accident rate was 10 times what it should have been. So my boss called me in. He said, Thacker, I want you to go out to Lockheed. We were stationed at Wright Field at that time. All the test work was at Wright Field. And so I went out to Lockheed. We took 5 airplanes up on the dry lakes. We flew for 500 hours with no accidents. I grounded the airplane once, but it was just a very simple rework of one of the parts of the retract gear system. And I told the gang that you're always supposed to stay within gliding distance of one of the dry lakes. At least you have. So in case you have an engine failure for any reason, you can make one of the dry lakes. And who do you think I caught reporting to San Francisco radio? Yeager. I said, Charles, what's this I hear about you being over San Francisco? Well, yeah, I reported over some. I told you that we were going to be within gliding distance from one of the dry lakes. And that P-80 will not glide from San Francisco to one of the dry lakes with no power. Well, yes, I guess so. So I grounded Chuck for a whole month. So the other thing, one of my 3 real airmen, Lindbergh, and I'm reading his biography, and right in the middle of his biography, and I don't know where this came from, but there was a paragraph in that page that I couldn't believe what I was reading. He had fathers, 2 illegitimate German children, each by two sisters. My hero fathered two illegitimate children in Germany of two sisters. You know, that's, even today, that's not accepted really behavior. But that's right. He fathered two illegitimate children in Germany. And he would be, you would see, well, he would be an old man right now. I don't know whether they had children. I don't know whether it was, but nevertheless, there was this hard ground, wasn't a paperback, and
That was Mr. Yeager still alive?
Now I know Chuck very well. He's been a guest in my home many times with his first wife, and of course, after he set the after he broke the speed record of Mach 1, his life was not his own. He probably spoke to every Rotary Club in the States, and he almost killed himself many times trying to get there. And but I haven't been able to get a hold of Chuck. Of course, he's incorporated himself and this and that and the other thing. But I've got a phone number, but I never can get that phone number to pick up the phone, even if there's nobody there at the end of the line. But nevertheless, Chuck did it on $212 a month.
Loved to fly.
Loved to fly, and did it. Now you have 31 years of flying for the Air Force. And I think you've run out of questions.
Well, I do have just a few more.
All right, go ahead.
And these can be relatively quick, short answers.
All right.
So don't feel that you need to elaborate too much. So what I've been doing since I've been interviewing veterans for a while, I'm trying to make it more interactive with the general public and students and whatnot. So they've proposed a list of questions. I'm going to ask you, and then I'll share your answers with them if that's all right.
No, that's absolutely.
Okay. So the first one is, was there someone that you served with that you will never forget or that you have never forgotten?
Well, I've already mentioned one, and that was one of my three airman geniuses, and that's Chuck Yeager. I served with him, I commanded him, but when he was when he was under my supervision, Chuck is just a regular guy like all the rest of us, but he got 14 kills against the Germans. Now, how many people are you going to run to on the streets in San Clemente that got 14 kills against the Germans? Not me. So Chuck is, and he got, I think he got 5 in Vietnam, and I think he got 1 or 2 in Korea. So Yeager's just, we had too many God is my co-pilot type of books that God is my co-pilot is not around, and Chuck is. So yeah, Chuck is still alive. He's 5 years younger than I am, and I am I saw Chuck at a baseball game on the boob tube the other evening, and he was in a wheelchair, and that means he's not mobile. But I think you saw me walk out here, and I wasn't in a wheelchair.
Doing pretty good for 100.
I think it's pretty damn good for 100.
Question is, do you have any advice for younger generations, future generations, that you could offer?
Number one, there must be some Jewish red blood in my system someplace. Because if you start out with the 10 Commandments, that's a pretty good basic way of life. And if you get that little book that has which is known as the Bible, you'll find the good book. It has the 10 Commandments. If you follow them, you've got a real great basic way of life that the Jews, if followed, there would be a much better world, I'll say it. We could all use something from the 10 Commandments.
You mentioned earlier that supplies were low at the onset of the war. What kept you going while there were low supplies? Was there any motivation at that point?
Well, I was a little bit different from the average gentleman that was sitting right next to me at all times. And that is, I was not a draftee. I was not, I signed on for the duration because there was no stopping the war as far as I was concerned, because I had already signed on for 6 years, and I'd been fighting the war for 6 years, and they knew that I wanted to prove to myself and to my bosses that I was the real thing.
Did you carry any personal effects or items with you?
I had no, yes, me. That was all I had. I had that and my precious wife, and that was the best decision I ever made, asking her to marry me, because she said yes. And after we've been married 11 years, we happened to be stationed in Tucson, Arizona, and I had a friend in town that was an attorney, and he said, "Colonel, we've got one for you. It's in the hospital. It's a female, and if you want one, come down and get one." So we adopted this girl child when we were in Tucson. And wouldn't you know, in about 2 weeks, there were twin boys showed up. But Betty Jo said, "Honey, I just can't take on 3 in diapers. I just can't do it." So we had to turn on twin boys, which we really wanted, twin boys. But and that was a 2-shot deal, because then after we got one, then we couldn't get another. they said, "You've got your share, and you don't get any more." So we only ended up with just one child. But those are just.
Given all that you've seen and done, how do you put the horrors of war behind you, or do you?
Mostly I've done that. I don't have any terrible war stories to relate to you and to show how brave or how strong or how all this stuff, Because the first thing your human nature takes over. It's survival. Survival. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to fight, but you're going to fight first. In other words, you're going to kill the bastard before he kills you. And that's the attitude that you're going to have, that they're not going to get you. And I tell you the same thing I tell everybody else. They weren't going to get me. They can get you, but they're not going to get me.
My last question for you is, do you think we should reinstate the draft?
Well, yes. You can't believe everything the politician tells you. During World War II, we had 15 million American boys in uniform. 15 million is a lot of troops. Two-thirds of those 15 million were draftees. How would you like to have a company that had to draft to get people to go get killed? That's a tough order. That's a tough order. And that's what we had to do. And there was a few places where things were pushed just a little, such as where is the American Navy? It's in the bottom of Pearl Harbor. Of course, I guess we shouldn't have gone that far, but that's where it was. And so I would say yes, we should have a draft at all times. Doesn't hurt you any. Doesn't hurt you any.
I want to thank you very much for sitting down and speaking with me. Thank you for your service.
I hope that you don't feel as though that I high-marketed you or give you. I don't have any stone to sharpen on. If I haven't convinced you I'm the real thing by now, why should I be talking? Eh?
I don't think so. I think it's been an honor to sit down and speak with you.
No, it's been an honor for me to talk to you, because I got run over by a car in December, believe it or not, and kind of put me back a couple of slots, but that's all right. I'm 100. I beat the bastards, every one of them. Are you alone in this wide world of cutthroats?